On a chilly November afternoon, Claire Reynolds stood in the checkout line at the small-town grocery store, her cart filled with basic essentials: bread, milk, eggs, and a few items for the upcoming holiday dinner. Claire wasn't wealthy by any means. She worked 2 jobs to make ends meet and supported her younger brother, Ryan, who was attending college on a partial scholarship. Despite her struggles, Claire had always believed in small acts of kindness, and that belief had carried her through life's difficulties. As she unloaded her items onto the conveyor belt, a man in uniform joined the line behind her. His posture was stiff yet weary, his green duffel bag slung over one shoulder. Claire couldn't help but notice how young he looked. His face bore the marks of fatigue, but his eyes held a quiet determination. The soldier placed a few items on the belt: instant noodles, a small loaf of bread, and a single can of soup. Claire glanced at his weathered boots and the way he hesitated before adding a chocolate bar to his sparse selection. When the cashier finished ringing up her items, Claire impulsively turned to the soldier. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Would it be all right if I paid for your groceries too?" The soldier looked startled. "Oh, no, ma'am. That's not necessary," he said, his cheeks flushing. "I insist," Claire replied with a warm smile. "It's my way of saying thank you for your service." Reluctantly, the soldier nodded, murmuring his thanks. After she paid, the two exited the store together. Claire handed him the bag of groceries and added, "I hope you have a nice evening." "You too, ma'am," he said, tipping his cap before walking away. Claire didn't expect to see him again. Her act of kindness was just that, a simple gesture, with no strings attached. However, fate had other plans. The next morning, Claire woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing incessantly. Groggy, she reached for it and saw a flood of notifications. A friend had tagged her in a post on social media. Curious, she opened it and froze. The post featured a picture of the soldier, smiling shyly and holding the grocery bag she'd given him. The caption read, "Yesterday, a woman did something incredible for me. She didn't know my name or my story, but her kindness reminded me why I serve this country. Thank you, ma'am, for restoring my faith in humanity." Within hours, the post had gone viral. Hundreds of comments poured in, praising Claire's selflessness. But what stunned her most was a private message from the soldier himself. "Hi, ma'am," it began. "My name is Jake Bennett. I didn't get a chance to properly thank you yesterday. Your kindness came at a time when I really needed it. I've been away from home for months, and that small gesture reminded me of the good in the world. I'd like to repay you if I can." Claire smiled at the message but replied, "No repayment needed. Just keep being a light in the world." Jake, however, was determined. Over the next few days, he found subtle ways to show his gratitude. One morning, Claire opened her mailbox to find a handwritten letter from Jake. Inside was a gift card to her favorite coffee shop, along with a heartfelt note thanking her again. Though she felt a bit overwhelmed by the attention, Claire couldn't deny that it was heartwarming. Several weeks later, as the holidays approached, Claire was surprised to find Jake standing on her doorstep. He was dressed in civilian clothes, holding a large envelope in his hands. "Jake?" she said, startled. "Hi, Ms. Reynolds," he said, shifting nervously. "I hope it's okay that I stopped by. I wanted to give you something." Claire invited him inside, and he handed her the envelope. "This might seem a little over the top," he said, "but I thought about how much your kindness meant to me. So I reached out to a few friends and family members and, well, just open it." Inside the envelope was a collection of gift cards, handwritten notes, and even a check. Claire's eyes widened as she saw the total amount. It was over $1,500. "Jake, I can't accept this," she said, tears welling up. "You can?" he insisted. "I told people about what you did, and they wanted to pitch in. We all know how hard the holidays can be, especially for someone as selfless as you. Please let us do this for you." Claire hesitated but eventually nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen and appreciated. That holiday season, Claire hosted a small dinner for her brother and a few close friends, using some of the funds to make it special. She invited Jake as well, and he became fast friends with her brother Ryan. Over the meal, they laughed, shared stories, and reflected on the beauty of human connection. Though Claire had never expected anything in return for her small act of kindness, what she received was far greater than she could have imagined: a renewed faith in humanity, new friendships, and a reminder that even the smallest gestures can create ripples of goodness in the world. The holidays came and went, leaving Claire with a warmth in her heart she hadn't felt in years. As the new year began, she found herself reflecting on how one small gesture had cascaded into so many unexpected blessings. Jake had become a regular part of her and Ryan's lives, often stopping by to catch up or lend a helping hand around the house. He seemed grateful to have found a second family in them, and Claire was grateful for his presence too. One crisp February morning, Claire was rushing to her job at the local diner when her phone buzzed. It was a text from Jake. "Are you free this afternoon? I've got something I want to show you." Curious, she replied, "Sure, I'm off at 3. When her shift ended, Jake was waiting outside the diner, his truck idling in the parking lot. "Hop in," he said with a grin. "Where are we going?" Claire asked as she climbed into the passenger seat. "You'll see," Jake said, his tone teasingly mysterious. They drove out of town and down a winding road that led to a stretch of countryside Claire hadn't visited in years. Finally, Jake pulled up to a quaint, slightly run-down farmhouse. The roof was intact but in need of a fresh coat of paint, and the yard was overgrown with weeds. "What is this place?" Claire asked, stepping out of the truck. Jake smiled. "It's your dream." Claire blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" Jake walked her toward the front porch, gesturing grandly. "You told me once that you always dreamed of having a place like this, a little house where you could grow a garden, maybe keep a few chickens, and not worry about rent every month. Well, I made some calls, and it turns out this place is up for auction. It's not much now, but with a little love, it could be everything you've ever wanted." Claire stared at him, speechless. "Jake, I can't afford to buy a house." "You might not have to," he said. "The auction starts in a week, and I've already got some people lined up to help. Remember all those people who pitched in for the holidays? They want to help again. Between that and a little extra from my deployment fund, I think we can make it happen." Tears welled up in Claire's eyes. "Jake, this is too much." "It's not," he said firmly. "You've spent your whole life helping others, Claire. It's time someone helped you." Over the next week, Claire found herself swept up in a whirlwind of planning and excitement. Jake, true to his word, had rallied an entire group of supporters, people from the community who had heard about her act of kindness and wanted to pay it forward. A local contractor offered to donate his time to fix up the house, and a gardening club pitched in with seeds and tools for the future garden. Even Claire's co-workers at the diner pooled their tips to contribute. On the day of the auction, Claire sat nervously in the courthouse, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Jake sat beside her, his calm presence reassuring. When the bidding began, Claire's heart raced. She didn't dare raise her hand, letting Jake handle the process. To her amazement, the final bid, one that Jake had calculated to the penny, was accepted. She was now the proud owner of the farmhouse. The months that followed were some of the busiest and happiest of Claire's life. The community came together to transform the farmhouse into a cozy home. Volunteers painted the walls, repaired the roof, and cleared the yard. Claire learned how to plant tomatoes and cucumbers, her fingers caked with soil but her heart full of joy. Jake was there every step of the way, hammering nails, hauling supplies, and even learning how to build a chicken coop. Ryan pitched in on weekends, joking that his sister would soon have a full-fledged farm. One evening, as the sun set behind the rolling hills, Claire stood on her porch and gazed out at the yard. The garden was thriving, the house was warm and welcoming, and her small flock of chickens clucked contentedly in their coop. She couldn't believe how much her life had changed in just a few short months. Jake joined her, a glass of lemonade in hand. "You did it," he said with a smile. "No," Claire replied, shaking her head. "We did it." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You know, Claire, kindness has a funny way of coming back around. You didn't just help me that day in the grocery store, you inspired a whole lot of people. That's something rare." Claire smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "You already have," Jake said. "Every time you step onto this porch, every time you plant another seed or gather eggs from the coop, you're proving that goodness doesn't just stop, it grows." By the time summer rolled around, Claire's farmhouse had become a hub of activity. She started hosting small gatherings, inviting friends and neighbors to share meals made from her garden's bounty. Jake often brought his fellow soldiers over, and they marveled at how much the little house symbolized hope and community. Claire's story continued to spread, inspiring others to perform their own acts of kindness. Donations poured in for other struggling families in the area, and Claire often found herself helping organize fundraisers and food drives. Though life still had its challenges, Claire no longer faced them alone. She had a home, a community, and a renewed faith in humanity, a faith that had started with a simple gesture and grown into something far greater than she ever imagined. As autumn painted the hills around Claire's farmhouse in hues of gold and amber, the little community she had built grew stronger than ever. Her garden flourished, her chickens provided more eggs than she could use, and she had begun to teach neighbors and friends how to grow their own produce. The farmhouse, once a modest dream, had become a symbol of possibility, reminding everyone who visited that kindness had the power to transform lives. Jake had become an almost permanent fixture at the farmhouse. He and Ryan had taken to working on small construction projects together, from building a storage shed to setting up a rainwater collection system. They joked and laughed as if they had been brothers their whole lives, and Claire often found herself marveling at how naturally Jake had fit into their family. One crisp morning, Jake showed up on the porch with a bundle of papers in hand and an expression that suggested he was up to something. "Morning, Jake," Claire said, brushing dirt off her hands from tending the garden. "What brings you by so early?" He handed her the papers, his grin widening. "I think it's time you turned this place into something even bigger." Claire unfolded the documents, her brow furrowing as she read. It was a proposal, a detailed plan to turn her little farm into a community resource center. The idea was to use her extra produce and eggs to supply a small food pantry, host workshops on gardening and sustainable living, and even set up a space for kids to learn about agriculture. "I don't know what to say," Claire said, her voice trembling. "Say yes," Jake replied simply. "We've already got people willing to help. A couple of local businesses want to donate supplies, and the high school's shop class said they'd love to build the pantry shelves as a project. All we need is you to give the green light." Claire looked out at the farm, imagining it bustling with activity, neighbors exchanging tips on composting, kids learning how to grow their first carrots, families receiving fresh, healthy food when they needed it most. She felt a pang of doubt. "Jake, this sounds amazing, but what if I fail? What if it's too much?" "You won't," he said firmly. "You've already proven you can do incredible things. This is just the next step." After a long moment, Claire nodded. "Let's do it." The months that followed were a blur of activity. Volunteers flocked to the farm, hammering together shelves, painting signs, and setting up a small classroom in one of the storage sheds. Claire worked tirelessly alongside them, her confidence growing with every hurdle they overcame. The local news even caught wind of the project, running a story about the farm and its mission to build community through kindness. Donations poured in, bags of seeds, gardening tools, and even a small greenhouse from a nearby nursery. What had once been a quiet dream now felt like a movement. When the resource center officially opened in late spring, the turnout was overwhelming. Families came to pick up fresh produce and eggs, while children excitedly participated in the first gardening workshop. Claire stood at the center of it all, her heart swelling with pride and gratitude. Jake, standing beside her, nudged her shoulder. "Told you it would work." Claire laughed. "I guess you were right. But I couldn't have done this without you." "You could have," Jake said, his tone serious. "You just needed a little push." The resource center became a cornerstone of the community. Every week, Claire hosted classes on cooking with fresh ingredients, composting, and even basic carpentry, thanks to Ryan's growing expertise. The pantry provided food to dozens of families, and Claire made it a point to welcome each person with the same warmth she had shown Jake that day in the grocery store. One evening, after a particularly busy workshop, Jake approached Claire with a nervous energy she hadn't seen before. He held a small box in his hand, and Claire's heart skipped a beat. "I've been thinking a lot about what you've done here," he began. "How one small act of kindness turned into all of this. You've changed lives, Claire, including mine." Claire opened her mouth to respond, but Jake pressed on. "You showed me what it means to truly be part of a community, to believe in something bigger than yourself. And, well, I realized I want to be part of this. Part of your life. Always." He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant ring. "Claire Reynolds, will you marry me?" Tears filled Claire's eyes as she stared at him. "Jake Bennett, you never stop surprising me," she said with a laugh. "Yes, of course I'll marry you." The crowd that had gathered nearby erupted into cheers, having watched the proposal unfold. Ryan whooped loudly, already calling dibs on being best man. The wedding was a celebration of everything the farm stood for: love, community, and the power of kindness. Guests brought homemade dishes, flowers from their gardens, and handmade decorations. The ceremony took place under the oak tree in Claire's yard, with the golden light of sunset streaming through the branches. As Claire and Jake exchanged vows, Claire felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. What had started as a simple act of generosity had led her to this moment, a life filled with love, purpose, and a community that felt like family. And though she could never have predicted the journey, Claire knew one thing for certain: when you give kindness to the world, it has a way of coming back to you tenfold. The months after Claire and Jake's wedding were a whirlwind of joy and progress. The Resource Center, now affectionately called the Giving Grove, became a hub for learning and connection. The farm had expanded its reach, offering a weekly market where local artisans and farmers could sell their goods. Claire's produce, eggs, and homemade preserves were always a favorite, but what truly made the market special was the camaraderie it fostered. Jake had officially left active duty, choosing instead to work with local veterans organizations. He spearheaded a program that brought veterans to the farm for workshops and social events, helping them reconnect with civilian life through community engagement. He even started a Grow Together initiative, teaching veterans how to build and maintain small gardens at their homes. Ryan, inspired by everything happening around him, decided to pivot his studies toward environmental science. He began working on sustainability projects for the farm, including a solar panel installation and a water conservation system that would save thousands of gallons each year. His excitement for the work was infectious, and Claire couldn't have been prouder of her younger brother. One sunny afternoon, as Claire was weeding her garden, she noticed a group of children laughing and running through the yard. They had come for a field trip organized by a local school, and their curiosity about farming was boundless. Claire knelt down beside one little boy who was examining a tomato plant with wide eyes. "Do you want to pick one?" she asked gently. The boy hesitated. "I don't know how." Claire smiled and guided his small hand toward a ripe, red tomato. "Just twist gently like this." When the tomato came free, the boy's face lit up with pride. "I did it," he exclaimed, holding it up for his classmates to see. Moments like these filled Claire's heart. She saw herself in the children, the same sense of wonder and possibility she had felt as a young girl dreaming of a life where she could make a difference. As the seasons changed, so did Claire's plans for the farm. One day, while brainstorming ideas with Jake, an unexpected thought struck her. "What if we started a scholarship fund?" she asked, her eyes lighting up. "For kids in the community who want to study agriculture or environmental science?" Jake nodded thoughtfully. "I think that's a great idea. We could host an annual fundraiser to kick things off." The idea quickly took root. With the help of volunteers, Claire and Jake organized a fall festival to raise money for the scholarship fund. The event featured hayrides, a pumpkin patch, live music, and booths showcasing local crafts and produce. Claire's famous apple pie was the star of the bake sale, and Jake wowed the crowd with a barbecue cook-off. The festival was a resounding success, raising over $10,000, enough to fund scholarships for several students. When Claire handed the first scholarship check to a young woman named Lily, who dreamed of becoming an agricultural scientist, she felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. "This is just the beginning," Claire told Lily. "I know you're going to do amazing things." One crisp winter evening, as Claire and Jake sat by the fireplace sipping hot cocoa, Jake reached for Claire's hand. "Do you ever think about how far you've come?" he asked. Claire chuckled. "All the time. Sometimes it feels like a dream. But then I remember it all started with a grocery bag." Jake smiled, his eyes filled with admiration. "You didn't just change my life that day. You changed so many lives." Claire leaned against him, her heart full. "And it's all because you wouldn't take no for an answer." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the flames dance in the hearth. Outside, the first snow of the season blanketed the farm, creating a scene of serene beauty. The Giving Grove stood as a beacon of hope, its lights glowing softly against the winter sky. In the years that followed, Claire's farm continued to thrive. The Giving Grove grew into a regional model for community-driven sustainability, attracting visitors from far and wide. Claire and Jake became mentors to countless people, guiding them in their own journeys of kindness and growth. The scholarship fund expanded, supporting dozens of students who went on to make significant contributions in agriculture and environmental science. Many of them returned to the farm to share their knowledge, creating a cycle of learning and giving that enriched the entire community. Claire often reflected on how one small act of kindness had set this all in motion. It reminded her that the seeds of generosity, once planted, could grow into something extraordinary. And as she watched her farm flourish, surrounded by the love and support of her family and friends, she knew that her story was not just about a woman who paid for a soldier's groceries. It was about the power of compassion to transform lives and build a brighter future for everyone. As the years went by, the Giving Grove became more than a farm or a community center. It became a legacy. Claire, Jake, Ryan, and the many others who had joined them in their mission worked tirelessly to ensure its growth and sustainability. What had once been a humble act of kindness had blossomed into a movement that reached far beyond their small town. One summer morning, Claire woke up early, as she often did, to tend to the garden. The scent of freshly tilled soil and blooming wildflowers greeted her as she stepped outside. She glanced around at the farm, taking in the rows of vegetables, the bustling chicken coop, and the new greenhouse Ryan had recently finished constructing. It was a sight that filled her with pride every single day. Jake walked out to join her, carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "What's on the agenda today, boss?" he teased. Claire laughed. "Harvesting, teaching a class on preserving vegetables, and maybe convincing the kids not to chase the chickens again." "Good luck with that last one," Jake said, handing her a mug. "I'll get started on the repairs for the fence by the south pasture. The windstorm last night knocked a few boards loose." Their easy banter was a reflection of how seamlessly their lives had blended. Jake's decision to leave active duty and focus on helping others through the Giving Grove had been one of the best choices they'd ever made. Together they had built something far greater than either of them could have imagined. Later that day, Claire hosted a canning workshop in the small classroom near the pantry. Mothers and fathers, grandparents, and even a few teenagers gathered around as she demonstrated how to turn fresh tomatoes into jars of homemade sauce. "This is more than just cooking," she explained. "It's a way to preserve what we've worked so hard to grow and to share it with others." The room buzzed with laughter and chatter as the participants took turns slicing tomatoes, stirring pots, and carefully ladling sauce into jars. By the end of the session, everyone left with a sense of accomplishment and a jar or two to take home. Claire couldn't help but smile as she cleaned up the space. Moments like these reminded her why she had fought so hard to make the Giving Grove a reality. It wasn't just about food or farming, it was about bringing people together and empowering them to take care of one another. In the fall, the Giving Grove hosted its largest harvest festival yet. Families from all over the region came to enjoy the festivities. There were hayrides, apple bobbing, face painting, and even a small petting zoo with animals donated for the day by a local farm. The centerpiece of the festival was the community dinner, where long tables were set up under strings of twinkling lights. Dishes made from the farm's produce filled the tables, and people of all ages sat together, sharing food and stories. As Claire looked around at the gathering, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The faces surrounding her were not just neighbors or visitors, they were friends, family, and a testament to the power of kindness. Jake stood beside her, his arm draped around her shoulder, and Ryan raised a glass in a toast. "To the Giving Grove," Ryan said, his voice strong and proud. "And to my sister, whose big heart started it all." The crowd erupted in cheers, and Claire felt her cheeks flush with warmth. She didn't think of herself as extraordinary, but in that moment she realized that her simple decision to help someone in need had created something extraordinary. Over the years, the Giving Grove's influence spread even further. Other communities reached out to learn from Claire and Jake's model, creating their own versions of resource centers and community farms. Claire was often invited to speak at events, where she shared her story and emphasized the importance of small acts of kindness. One evening, after returning from a speaking engagement, Claire sat down with Jake on their porch. The stars above them sparkled like diamonds, and the cool night air carried the scent of lavender from the garden. "Do you ever think about what life would have been like if we'd never met?" Jake asked. Claire smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "Sometimes, but then I remember that it was meant to happen. The universe has a funny way of putting the right people in your path." Jake nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "It's incredible, isn't it? How one small decision one moment can change everything." Claire reached for his hand, her fingers lacing with his. "It is. And it reminds me that we have to keep paying it forward. There are so many people out there who just need a little kindness to get back on their feet." Jake kissed her forehead. "And if anyone can show them that, it's you." Years later, The Giving Grove was still thriving, with new generations carrying on the work Claire and Jake had started. The scholarship fund had supported dozens of students, many of whom returned to the farm to give back. The Resource Center continued to provide food, education, and hope to countless families. Claire and Jake, now older but no less passionate, often sat together on the porch, watching the farm they had built with love and determination. They knew their legacy wasn't just the land or the buildings. It was the lives they had touched and the kindness they had inspired. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the farm in a golden glow, Claire took Jake's hand and smiled. "We've done a good thing here, haven't we?" Jake squeezed her hand. "The best thing." And as the stars began to twinkle in the evening sky, they sat together, content in the knowledge that their journey, one that had started with a simple act of generosity, had created a brighter, kinder world for everyone.